The twin suns were setting on the red desert planet of Virelia. Heat still rose from the cracked earth as a soft wind blew sand over dry bones and old machine parts. It looked like a place long forgotten by life. A small human shuttle fell from the sky, smoke trailing behind. The engine coughed, sparked, then died as the ship crash-landed in the dunes with a thud. The door burst open, and a man stumbled out, coughing. His name was Jason Hart, a human cargo pilot. His ship had been hit by pirates. He had lost everything: cargo, connection, direction. Now only survival mattered. He checked the scanner on his wrist. No cities, no signals, just dust and silence. He grabbed his pack and started walking, hoping to find a rock shelter or maybe an old outpost. Then he saw something, movement in the sand. At first he thought it was wind, but then he looked closer. Something was half buried under the dunes, a shape, a person. Jason ran forward. As he got closer, he realized it wasn't human. It was a woman, but not like anyone he had seen before. Her skin was a pale violet color, dry and cracked. Thin silver markings ran down her arms like lightning veins. Her hair was dark and tangled, sticking to her face. She wore a torn cloak, almost turned to rags. Jason knelt beside her. Her chest was barely rising. "Hey," he said, tapping her face lightly. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes opened just a little. They glowed faint blue for a second before closing again. Jason checked for injuries. She was burning with fever, dehydrated, and had sand in her mouth. Her lips trembled, and then, in a weak voice, she whispered, "Don't leave me." His heart sank. She wasn't just some lost traveler. She was dying. He looked around. There was no help, no shelter, no one coming. "I'm not leaving you," he said quietly. He pulled her out of the sand, lifting her gently into his arms. She was light, too light, like she hadn't eaten in days. Jason carried her back to his broken shuttle. The power was dead, but he had a med kit. He gave her water drops, used a stim patch to bring down her fever, and wrapped her in his only blanket. As he worked, she stirred. Her voice was soft but full of confusion. "You are human?" Jason nodded. "Yeah, and you're alive now because of me." She looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to remember something, then closed her eyes again. Hours passed. Outside, the desert turned cold. Stars filled the sky. Inside the shuttle, Jason stayed by her side. He didn't sleep. He just watched her breathe, afraid she might stop. He didn't know who she was, didn't know if she was dangerous. But something in her face, so lost, so broken, pulled at something deep inside him. When morning came, she opened her eyes again. "You stayed," she whispered. Jason smiled tiredly. "Yeah, I told you I would." A tear slipped from the corner of her eye. She sat up slowly, every movement painful. "I was left to die." Jason frowned. "By who?" She looked away. "My own people, because I refused." "Refused what?" She didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, she looked at him again. Her eyes shimmered in the early light. "You saved my life," she said softly. "That means you are now my mate." Jason blinked. "Wait, what?" She nodded slowly, her voice steady now. "In my culture, if someone saves your life, especially when you are near death, a life bond is formed. It cannot be broken." He sat back, confused and startled. "You're saying I married you by saving you?" She tilted her head. "Yes. You touched my body when it was weak. You shared heat, water, medicine. You chose not to leave. That means we are one now." Jason looked at the desert through the shattered window. This was not how he expected his day to go. Jason stared at the alien woman sitting quietly inside the broken shuttle. The cold desert wind blew dust against the windows, but inside, the silence felt heavier. She was awake now, fully awake, and watching him with eyes that glowed faintly blue. Her body was still weak, but her presence had changed. She didn't look like a dying stranger anymore. She looked like someone who knew exactly what she was about to do. "You saved me," she said again, her voice calm, almost formal. Jason shrugged. "You needed help. I couldn't just leave you." She slowly reached up and touched the silver tattoo on her collarbone. It shimmered under her fingers. "You don't understand, human. What you did, it means something." Jason raised an eyebrow. "You mean because I carried you? Gave you water?" She nodded. "Yes, that action binds us. In Virelian law, saving a dying soul from death creates a bond, a life bond. It is sacred. It cannot be undone." Jason blinked. "Wait, are you saying we're married?" Her head tilted. "That is your word for it. In my world, it is a union deeper than marriage, a sacred debt. You are now my bonded." Jason stood slowly. "Hold on. Where I come from, marriage isn't automatic. We choose who we—" "You did choose," she interrupted. "When you touched my dying skin, when you shared your heat, when you gave me life again, you made your choice." Jason opened his mouth to argue but stopped. Something in her voice, soft but unshakable, made him pause. "Look," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't know any of that. I was just trying to do the right thing. That is why the bond is strong," she whispered. Jason sat down across from her. "What happens now?" The alien woman, Soraya, as she had finally told him, looked toward the desert horizon. Her voice grew quiet, almost haunted. "If my people learn of our bond, they will come, not to celebrate, but to judge." Jason frowned. "Why would they care?" "Because I am not just anyone. I carry royal blood, a daughter of the broken line. I was meant to be given to a warlord, but I refused, so they threw me into the sands to die. If they find me alive and bonded to a human, it will bring shame to them." Jason leaned forward. "So, you're saying me saving you might have just started a war?" Soraya didn't answer. Instead, she reached into the folds of her torn cloak and pulled out a silver crystal. It glowed softly. She placed it between them. "This is my proof," she said. "If they come, this shows I was saved through sacred law. If they reject it, they reject our gods." Jason looked at the crystal, then at her. "This is a lot," he said. "A few hours ago I was just trying to get home. Now you're telling me I'm married to an alien princess and might get hunted by angry royals?" She gave him a small smile. "Yes, that is exactly what I'm telling you." Jason chuckled dryly. "Great, just great." He stood and began, checking what little gear he had left. A half-broken scanner, 1 water pack, 2 emergency rations, and a signal flare he wasn't even sure would work. Soraya watched him move. "Are you angry?" Jason paused, then turned toward her. "No, I'm not angry. I'm confused. Scared, maybe. But I don't regret saving you." She looked down. "You are, unlike most I have known." There was a silence between them. Not cold, not awkward. Just quiet understanding. Finally, Jason said, "All right. If this bond is real, if it means something to you, I'll respect it. But I need to know. What does that mean for me? What happens next?" Soraya stood slowly, still unsteady but proud. "It means you are not alone anymore, and it means you must stand with me when they come." Jason nodded once slowly, then let them come, he said. Jason couldn't stop staring at the silver marks on Soraya's arms. They looked like tattoos, but they shimmered and moved slightly under her skin, like living light. When the desert sun touched them through the cracked window of the shuttle, they glowed faint blue. Not just beautiful, but strange, alien, powerful. "What are those?" he finally asked, pointing gently. Soraya didn't look up. She was kneeling by the broken scanner, trying to reroute its power. "They are my truth, my shame, my inheritance." That doesn't help, Jason said, walking closer. They look like data paths? She nodded slowly. You are not far off. These marks are ancient, passed through the bloodline. Only those born of the royal core can carry them. Jason's eyes widened. You mean like genetic symbols? Yes, she said. They record everything. Who I am, who I was meant to be, and the crime I committed. Jason blinked. Wait, what crime? She looked up then. Her eyes were cold and tired, like someone much older than she appeared. I refused to become a weapon. There was silence. Jason sat down across from her, watching her closely. Soraya touched her own skin, fingers brushing over the glowing marks. My people. They train royal daughters from birth. We are not raised to lead. We are raised to bind, to be tools of power. Given to generals, shared for alliances, controlled. She turned her arm toward Jason. The marks glowed brighter. But I chose not to obey. When they ordered me to marry the warlord of the southern moons, I escaped. I told them I'd rather die in the dust than be chained in gold. Jason's throat tightened. So they left you, he said quietly. Soraya nodded. Yes, they dropped me in the burning waste with no food, no water. They sealed my exile with silence. To the stars, I was already dead. Jason looked down, then back up at her, until I found you. Soraya met his gaze. And now that bond has brought you into danger, she said softly. They will come. Not just for me, but for the shame I bring to their name. You saved what they meant to destroy. Jason stood. So, what do these marks mean for me now? She rose too, slowly. If they read your DNA through the bond, they will see it. Your imprint mixed with mine. Your energy inside my life markings. It means they cannot erase me quietly now. You are proof, you are witness. Jason gave a dry laugh. So I'm not just your accidental husband. I'm a problem for your entire empire. A small smile crossed her lips. Yes, a very big one. Then the shuttle's emergency light blinked red. The scanner flickered to life. Jason rushed over. I think the flare signal finally connected. Soraya looked at the screen. Her face hardened. It's not a rescue ship. Jason stared at her. How do you know? She pointed at the blinking code. That's a royal code, one only used by seekers. They're not here to talk, Jason. They're here to erase what they call a mistake. Jason felt a chill crawl down his back. Can we run? Not far. Not fast, she replied. But we can do something better. What's that? She stepped close enough for him to see the strange light in her eyes again. We show them the mistake they made, by surviving. Jason gave a crooked smile. All right, but if they ask who I am, what do I say? She didn't hesitate. You say I am her bonded and I will not step aside. The desert wind howled outside as the royal transport ship descended from the sky. Jason stood near the entrance of the old wrecked shuttle, eyes narrowed. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a diplomat. But he could feel it in his bones. This was not a rescue. It was a test. A trap. Or something worse. Soraya stood beside him, now fully dressed in her repaired cloak. She had found old armor plates buried in the wreckage and wrapped them around her chest and arms. Her silver markings glowed brighter than ever, as if they knew the blood of her past was about to return. The ship landed with a sharp hiss, sand bursting outward. Then the door opened. Out stepped 3 figures, tall, armored, faceless. Behind them came a 4th, smaller, hooded. A voice like ice cut the air. Soraya of the Falling Star bloodline. Your presence is required before the Elder Tribunal. Jason stepped forward, jaw tight. You can't just take her. The hooded figure turned slightly toward him. And you must be the human. The one who interfered. Jason took a breath. She nearly died. I didn't interfere. I saved her. Exactly. the voice replied. That is why the bond has been recorded. That is why the tribunal will decide whether you live or burn with her shame. Jason glanced at Soraya. She nodded once, her face calm but unreadable. I'll go, she said. But he comes with me. The voice was silent for a moment. Then, as you wish. The royal ship soared across the desert sky. Inside the air was colder, cleaner, but Jason felt more suffocated than ever. He sat beside Soraya, both of them surrounded by silent armored guards. Jason leaned toward her and whispered, What's going to happen when we get there? They'll question us, she replied. Judge our bond. If they believe it's false or forced, you'll be punished, and I'll be erased. Jason swallowed hard. Erased? In my culture, to erase someone means removing their name from all records, as if they never existed. A living death. Jason's fists clenched. Then we'll make sure they believe. It's real. She turned to him, her voice dropped to a whisper. Jason, it is real. He looked at her, and in that second, the fear didn't matter. The royal city was unlike anything Jason had ever seen. Carved into the side of a mountain, the buildings shimmered like glass and bone. Tall towers floated slightly above the stone, connected by energy bridges. The people were silent as they passed, their faces covered with silver veils. No one smiled. At the center of it all stood the tribunal tower, white, sharp, cold. Inside the great hall, 100 steps led up to a high platform where 7 figures sat, hooded elders, their faces hidden behind masks of crystal. Jason stood at the bottom with Soraya. His clothes were dusty, his boots cracked. Her hand rested lightly on his arm. A deep voice echoed from above. Soraya, you have returned, though none called you back. Why? She stepped forward. Because I live, and because the bond has been formed, the center elder spoke. The human stands beside you, explain his place. Soraya spoke firmly. He saved me from death in the burning waste. According to the law of sacred breath, I am bound to him. Another elder leaned forward. But he is not of our kind. The law was not written for off-worlders. Jason's voice rose. Then, change your law, or admit that your justice depends only on convenience. The room went still. Soraya looked at him, almost in shock. The lead elder asked slowly, Human, do you claim this bond is true? Jason looked straight into the glowing eyes on the platform. Yes, he said. Not just because of your law. Because I choose it. I choose her. Soraya blinked. Her hand trembled slightly. There was a long silence. Then one elder whispered, Then let the challenge decide. Jason turned. Challenge? Soraya's face turned pale. It means you must prove yourself, she said. To their eyes. And to their tradition. Jason stepped forward. Fine, he said. Then I'll prove I belong. Jason stood in the middle of a giant arena made of black stone. Thousands of alien eyes watched from the silver balconies above, silent, judging. The twin moons of Virelia hovered overhead, casting a pale blue light. He wasn't wearing armor, no shield, just the same dusty clothes from the desert. Across from him stood his challenger, General Kyle, Soraya's former betrothed. Kyle was twice his size, covered in dark ceremonial armor that pulsed with red energy. His eyes glowed like burning coals. He stepped forward and pointed a spear at Jason's chest. This human is weak, Kyle said loudly. He does not fight. He does not bleed for honor. He cannot protect what he has stolen. The crowd growled, in agreement. Jason looked up at the royal tribunal seated above and then toward Soraya, standing near the edge of the platform. Her hands were clenched, her face unreadable, but her eyes were locked on him. He wasn't supposed to win. This was not a fair fight. It was a trap. Before the match began, Soraya had warned him in private. The warrior challenge is not about strength. It's about worth. They don't expect you to win. They expect you to fail with dignity. Jason had asked, So what do I do? She whispered, Be human. Now, standing in the arena, Jason closed his eyes and breathed in slowly. He didn't come from a warrior race. He couldn't outfight Kale, but he could outthink him. The drums echoed. The horn blew. The challenge had begun. Kale roared and charged. Jason dodged, barely missing the edge of the spear. The crowd laughed, thinking it would be over in seconds. Jason rolled, grabbed a handful of arena dust and flung it into Kale's face. It barely slowed him. Kale swung again. Jason ducked and backed away, looking for anything to use. His eyes darted to the arena wall. Strange, humming metal rods circled the edge. Energy weapons? No, too old. But they were still powered. Jason ran to the wall, grabbed one rod, and ripped it from its socket. Sparks flew. He faced Kale again, holding the rod like a staff. Kale grinned. "You think that toy will save you?" "No," Jason replied. "But maybe it'll teach you something new." Jason jabbed the staff into the ground. It struck a buried energy plate. A pulse of static burst upward, and Kyle stumbled, his armor briefly short-circuiting. The crowd gasped. Jason didn't wait. He used the moment to slide behind Kyle and hit the base of his armor's neck with the sparking rod. Kyle growled and turned, swinging wildly. But Jason kept moving. He wasn't fighting with brute strength, he was fighting with brains, with instinct, with heart. 10 minutes passed. Jason was bleeding, tired, but still standing. Kale's armor was scorched. He roared in frustration. "Stand still, coward!" Jason grinned through bloodied lips. "You want me to stand still? That's your problem. You think honor is about standing still and swinging harder." Jason threw down the rod and raised his hands. "You want to finish this? Come on, end it." Kale lunged, and Jason stepped aside. Kale stumbled forward straight into the central pillar of the arena. His own momentum cracked his armor. He hit the ground with a grunt, stunned. Silence. Jason didn't move. He didn't need to. He had already won. From the high platform, one elder rose. The challenge is complete. The human did not kill. He did not run. He stood and survived. Another elder said softly, "And proved he has the courage, not of our kind, but of his." The crowd was silent. Then, slowly, some began to nod. Soraya stepped forward, her voice calm but full of fire. "You gave me to a monster and called it duty. But this man, you call him weak, yet he fought not to dominate, but to protect. That is the strength you fear." She turned to Jason and said clearly, "You are my bonded, my choice, and no tradition will steal that from me again." Kale lay in the dust, broken, silenced. Jason, battered and breathless, looked up at Soraya. For the first time since his crash, he smiled without fear. Night fell over the royal mountain city, and with it came silence. The arena had emptied. The watchers had left. But the whispers had just begun. Jason sat near the edge of a glowing balcony, his body sore, his arms scraped and bruised. He didn't care. He had faced death, and he was still breathing, but he could feel it. Something had changed. The way people looked at him, the way Soraya avoided his eyes. She stood just beyond the light, facing the shadows of the old tower walls. The wind tugged at her cloak. Her silver mark shimmered quietly. Jason finally broke the silence. "You haven't said a word since the fight." Soraya didn't turn. "Because I knew this moment would come. The moment you'd want to know. The whole truth." He stood slowly. "I've already seen enough. They left you to die. I stood by you." She shook her head. "You still don't understand. You know part of the story, not the part that matters." Jason stepped closer. "Then tell me why they really wanted you dead." Soraya's voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I carry the last forbidden memory." She turned to him now, her eyes shining like liquid glass. "My mother wasn't one of them," she said. "She was from the Outlands, a healer, a rebel. My father, Prince, Thalor loved her in secret. When I was born, they feared my bloodline would be different. Jason watched her carefully. Different how? She raised her sleeve, revealing a part of her arm he hadn't seen before. There, beneath the glowing tattoos, was a deep scar, burned into her flesh, not part of the royal markings. They tried to erase her from my memory, Soraya said. They burned her name out of my skin, called her unpure. And when I turned of age, they gave me one choice: marry a warlord and forget everything, or vanish like she did. Jason felt the weight of her words. You chose exile. She nodded. I ran, not for honor, not for politics. I ran because I couldn't breathe inside their chains. Jason stepped beside her. And now, Soraya turned to face him fully. Now they know I survived. And worse, I've bonded with someone outside their bloodlines. That bond rewrites the line of succession. Jason froze. Succession? She hesitated, then said it. If I live, and if the bond is honored, you won't just be my mate. You'll be next in line to rule. Jason's jaw dropped. I thought, I was just trying to save someone in the desert, not marry into a throne. That's why they'll come again, she whispered. Not to judge, but to remove us quietly. Just then, a small orb of light floated from the shadows. A messenger drone. It stopped in front of Soraya and opened a hidden slot, revealing a glowing symbol, a black flame with 3 rings. Her face paled. She stepped back. What is it? Jason asked. She replied slowly. A death mark. They've sent seekers. Jason grabbed her arm. Who are they? Silent assassins. Not soldiers, not judges. They don't ask. They erase. Jason looked around. When will they come? They already have, she said, eyes scanning the rooftops. They never deliver the mark unless the hunt has begun. Jason clenched his fists. Then we run. Soraya looked at him, torn between flight and fight. No, she said. I've run enough. She reached into her cloak and pulled out a small crystal dagger. There's one last truth left. Jason's eyes widened. What are you? She handed it to him. This blade belonged to my mother. If I die, it carries my full memory core, my story, my blood, my proof. You must get it off this planet. Jason took the blade, gripping it tightly. You're not dying, Soraya. She looked at him, eyes soft. If we live through this night, everything changes. From the shadows, a soft hiss echoed. Jason turned sharply. The hunt had begun. The moonlight bled across the rooftops of the royal city. Jason and Soraya stood back to back on the high terrace of the tribunal tower. The wind whispered between the stone arches, carrying with it the soft sound of footsteps, too quiet to be ordinary. The seekers had arrived. They didn't speak. They didn't threaten. They were trained to erase targets, not question them. Jason held the crystal dagger Soraya had given him. Its edge shimmered with her family's memory, her mother's name, her bloodline, her truth. A truth they wanted, to bury forever. But not tonight. The first seeker leapt from the shadow like a ghost. Jason ducked, the wind of the blade grazing his face. Soraya moved like flowing water. Despite her weakened body, her strikes were precise. Her glowing marks lit up, pulsing with each move. It wasn't just a fight, it was a statement. I am alive. I will not be forgotten. Another seeker lunged for Jason. He blocked with the dagger's hilt and countered with a sharp kick. It wasn't elegant, but it was enough. He had learned one thing since crashing on this world. Humans may not be born. Warriors, but they don't give up. But they were outnumbered. 3 more seekers surrounded them now. Faster, stronger, silent. Jason breathed hard, shoulder bleeding. Soraya's movements had slowed. Then, a loud boom echoed from the lower plaza. Lights exploded in the sky. Jason turned. What was that? From the streets below, a massive crowd surged forward. Aliens, royals, outcasts, soldiers, and leading them. A cloaked elder from the tribunal. Jason recognized him, the only one who had stayed silent during the trial. Now he spoke, voice deep and clear. We've seen enough. We've heard the lies, and we've watched this man stand for what our bloodline abandoned long ago. He lifted a staff. Let the people decide. The seekers paused. They had no permission to kill in public. The crowd was growing, chanting Soraya's name. Jason looked at her. They're standing with you. She nodded, almost in disbelief. No, they're standing with us. One seeker hissed and turned to finish the mission. Jason stepped forward. No more. He raised the dagger, but instead of fighting, he dropped it right in the center of the platform. The crystal burst open, releasing a soft blue wave of light. From it came a voice. A woman's voice. I am Mira, daughter of the Outlands. I loved not for power, but for truth. My daughter was taken from me, but she carries my soul. If this empire fears love, then it was never an empire worth saving. The entire city froze. The truth was out. Heard by all. The seekers vanished, slipping into the night like smoke. Their mission had failed. Jason dropped to his knees, exhausted. Soraya knelt beside him, pressing her forehead to his. Do you know what you've done? She whispered. He smiled weakly. Probably made 100 enemies, she smiled back. And one unbreakable bond. Days later, a new tribunal was held, not in secret chambers, but in the open. Soraya stood before her people, not as an exile, but as an heir. Jason stood beside her, not as an outsider, but as her chosen. The elder's voice echoed once more. Do you accept the bond of life freely and without fear? Soraya looked into Jason's eyes. I do. Jason held her hand. So do I. The people cheered. As the twin moons rose that night, Jason and Soraya sat alone under the stars. She rested her head on his shoulder. I was meant to be forgotten, she whispered. You were meant to be found, he replied. And with that, two worlds, once divided by fear and silence, began to unite, not by law, not by war, but by love.